So a surrogate mother has secured access to her biological child after a court intervened in a row over parental rights with the child's same-sex parents. It is quite confusing, but the couple claimed that the little boy would be confused if he saw his mother, if that's what we call it, but the judge ruled in her favour, saying that they must allow her to be able to spend time with the little boy, and we're basically asking whether you agree with this. Paula, it's a complicated story, and actually surrogacy in general in this country, because we don't have a huge amount of legislation around it, is quite confusing. Where do you sit in this debate?
So this is an interesting one, and I'm so glad that you're talking about it, because the broader topic of, you know, what is a parent's role actually in a child's life? Because we can expand it that far. You know, is it, you know, do we challenge fathers to be involved in their children's lives? Do we demonise mothers who choose, after difficult thinking process, who choose to then say, I'm going to give my child up for adoption? What do we think about mothers who choose to carry a baby, surrogate mothers, and then hand that baby over to a couple and then step back away from that child? So it's a massive topic that we should be talking about because of the impact, of course, on society. Here we have a case where that impact was brought to the family courts. So we had a couple who entered into an agreement, because that's all it can be, not a contract, just an agreement for her to carry their child and for her to then hand over all parental responsibilities in relation to that child to them.
It was their child, however, it was her egg, so it was the child is biologically related to her as well as her carrying it, just to be really clear on that.
Yes, it doesn't always have to be that,
no, it does
case.
Not.
Yes,
no.
But in this case, that's right. So it was her embryo and one of the father's sperm, and so there was a biological connection between one of the fathers. Yes. That's correct. In this circumstance where we have surrogacy, what should happen in the agreement is that you have the child, you hand the child over, and within that 6-week period when the child's birth is registered, you will also agree to something called a parental order. And that is me saying to you and to Storm, Charlie, I no longer have any parental rights or responsibilities to this child. I'm handing them all over to you. I'm stepping back. i.e., I technically am no longer a parent in the eyes of the law and any other statutory bodies to this child. Is that right? To answer your question, I'm uncomfortable about that because I see the effect that it has on the children as they grow. Children are naturally curious, and we also see that in the research about the need for children to understand where they come from. Exactly, where they came from.
Well, in adoption, I believe the child always should have the ability now to be able to access the details of their biological parents. And so surely that would be the same in surrogacy, Charlie? Or where do you sit on this?
I mean, I agree broadly with everything that Paul was saying, and it's such an emotive and thought-provoking topic. So it's good that we're talking about it. I mean, I'm assuming in this case, because of the agreement that the gay couple had with the surrogate mother, for her to see the child every sort of 6 weeks. So there was a relationship there already. So you can understand why the judge might have said, well, it would be even more confusing and detrimental to the welfare of the child.
So I believe the child's 3 now.
Exactly. So to take that sort of relationship away at that age, I think would be even more detrimental. But of course, when you're talking about surrogacy, I think you've also got to remember the welfare of the child and the mother, who's obviously giving up what they've given birth to. But I do think if you're going to do that, you've obviously got to think about it very, very carefully. And I know that goes without saying, but it is slightly like adoption, because if you are handing over your child to somebody else for whatever reason, of which there'll be a plenty, you're giving it to a loving couple, you would hope and expect, who want to raise that child as their own, who may not be able to have kids or for whatever reason they're entering to adoption. They have a right, if you're putting your child up for adoption and giving it to the adoptees, they have a right to raise that child with all the love and care that they want to. And I think when that child becomes 18, you're allowed to go and seek, because exactly as Paula said, we're curious animals, we're humans, you want to find out things about your parents, you want to find out things about life in general. So I think that should be, of course, extended to if you're a surrogate. You want to know where your genetics come from, or part of your genetics, if you're a surrogate sort of mother. You want to know where your DNA comes from.
But you don't think necessarily prior to that 18-year-old
I think if you're going to do something like this, you've got to be very, very clear and understanding that if you're handing over your child to another couple, that is what is going to happen.
Okay.
And that relationship will not exist for some time until such a time that you can... Otherwise, because as I say right from the start, the welfare of the child is paramount. And if there is a confusing relationship, or if there is animosity, which seems there might have been in this case a breakdown in relationship between the surrogates and the surrogatee, if that's a word, then of course that just opens up a whole can of worms. So the welfare of the child is paramount.
Oh, yeah, I mean, and I think in family court that is probably the rule. Let's go to the calls, because I think we have a few individuals who have experience with surrogacy. Linda from Newcastle, what's your experience with surrogacy, and where do you stand on this whole debate?
Oh, hi. So I've been a surrogate myself and have had 2 children for 2 different couples.
Oh, wow.
They're now 6 and 4.
Okay. And do you have a continued relationship with those children?
I do, yes. I've got a role in both of their lives, and that's really through their parents. I don't see myself as their mother in any way. They're my friends' children, and they know how they were born. They're of the age now where they have an understanding about how babies grow, so they've talked to me about that. And that ongoing relationship is really important. And I think for me, what's key is that you take the time to get to know each other. I'd been friends with both couples for over a year before we decided it was right to get pregnant and go on that journey together. And we had counselling in advance and lots of support around us. And I think that's what's absolutely key, is that a surrogate is in the right place, is entering into that agreement of their own volition, and that they understand. I was clear that I was choosing to help that couple. Those children wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for surrogacy. So don't see them as my children in any way.
It sounds like you have set up a really, really lovely environment for those children, and they have the best of both worlds, which is absolutely fabulous. Can I ask, was it your egg that was used? Are they biologically related to you?
They're not in that situation, but I've got friends who are surrogates who have done what's called straight surrogacy, using their own egg, and they feel in a similar way to me that it's not their child. That child would not exist if it wasn't for surrogacy. So I don't really think that there should be a difference between that, because it's about the intention that you set out with. And I think provided that is informed and supported, and the counselling and everything is there in advance, then that's appropriate. And I think when we make those decisions, then and then it's endorsed by the court order, then we do leave that responsibility with the parents to make the choices for their own children.
Absolutely.
But I think it's important that we do have reform in the law, which means that if relationships do break down in those very rare circumstances, that the children can access information about the person who carried them, which is proposed under the new law reform.
That's interesting, Linda, because that's actually what I was trying to butt in to ask you, is whether you think that we need more legislation around it, because there really is very little, and actually that's probably why this has ended up in the courts, because nobody really knows where they stand. It just sounds like you have built a really lovely relationship with the 2 couples that you have been a surrogate for. Linda, thank you very much for calling and sharing your experiences. Stay with us though, because after the break we are going to be taking more of your calls on. We're going to go to Joe in Lancaster, and I believe you are a surrogate, Joe.
I am, yes.
And you are currently carrying a child?
I am, yes. I'm still in the first trimester. But yeah, currently pregnant.
And what made you go into this? What made you... Is it friends of yours you're carrying the child for?
So we started off going through an agency. So there are 4 main agencies for surrogacy in the UK. So I registered my interest with one of them. And then I've been chatting to this particular couple since January, so it's been quite a long time. I think, with the job that I do as well, I see a lot of people that have struggled with fertility, and I just figured I'm done having my own family. Why wouldn't I really? It's such a lovely gift to be able to give to someone.
Well, as somebody, because I do know you're a midwife as well, so you are very attuned to what's going on and what is expected of you, and having had your own children. Having had your own children with all that experience and knowledge, are you completely confident that when you have that child, your hormones aren't all going to kick off and you might feel slightly differently?
I think I've got a bit of a weird perspective on it because I've been an egg donor as well. So I know I've got 2 children out there that has got my genetics. Obviously, I'm not in contact with them until they're 18 and possibly want to get in contact. And I think, this baby that I'm carrying is not genetically related to me. So I think that in itself will help. I think for me, the distinction I made is I very clearly did not want to both go through a pregnancy, which is a very emotional thing in itself, and then also have that be with my own biological child, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So you've separated that out. What do you think in terms of a surrogate mother's right? I don't even know whether, is surrogate mother the right term to use? A surrogate's right to see the child they birthed going forward prior to turning 18?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing, to be honest. I think sometimes people forget that, pregnancy is a big thing and being a surrogate is a very big process. And sometimes I think people forget that there is a person behind that. And as much as we know going into this that, it's not our child and it never will be our child, I think a lot of the surrogates I've spoken to feel very strongly that they want to have some kind of ongoing contact and friendship with that family. So for me, that is something that, when I selected a family that I wanted to carry a child for, that was something that was very important to me.
Okay, and that's a sort of conversation you've had with them. So going forward, you will have communication with this child? Yeah,
so at the moment we're in contact about every couple of days and we meet up maybe once a month just with our own families. And going forward, we have kind of agreed it will probably slow down a little bit because they'll be busy with a newborn. I'll be getting on with my life. But we still, want to be meeting up a few times a year and just keep in contact.
Yeah, and also maybe means that you're just a phone call away if the child ever has any questions and that you're not a complete stranger. And you know what, if it works, then great. Jo, thank you very much for calling with your experience of that and best of luck with the rest of the pregnancy. Vera from Cotswolds, what's your view on this situation? Do you think a surrogate should have a right to see their children going forward? We've just heard from Jo that many surrogates would quite like that ability.
Hello. I really do believe that a surrogate has got no right whatsoever. The right is to the child. When the child is old enough to make its own mind up whether it wants to see the mother that carried him or her.
But but Vera, you're very much thinking on behalf of the child and the child's parents, which is understandable. But what about the surrogate? What about the person who has sacrificed their body in order to create that life? I mean, it is not a small task. It's not a small job, and it doesn't come without its challenges. I just wonder whether actually it would benefit the mother to be able to continue to have a relationship with that child.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But you go into this with your eyes wide open.
And I think
know exactly what you're doing. You've made your mind up. You want to do this.
You want
to at the end of the day, you take that risk.
Okay, Vera, thank you very much for your call. You're sort of in line with Charlie on that one. It's still keeping those rights when the child turns 18, of course. Thank you very much for all your calls on this. We are going to move on to our final debate.